Finally, I get to meet you. I'm a big fan. I read Muerte in Zamora many years ago because my uncle lent me one copy, and it is a very difficult, if not impossible, book to find in Spain. It's out of print.
The one in Spanish now you're talking about?
Yes, I'm talking the 1990, the one in Spanish.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
I have a copy I got, but I had to make.
Okay, sure. Very good.
I needed to make copies because I couldn't find the book, and
No, so I think somebody must have bought out the edition because it disappeared within a month. It was gone from the bookstores.
I'm not surprised. It was like a hidden item. I couldn't find it anywhere, and I think that even my father stole my own copy. And it wasn't even my copy. So I feel really
I
bad.
I told you this. There is interest in republishing.
Oh, good. Yes, I think you mentioned. That's
My
good.
cousin Mercedes, who lives in England, who did the translation, she was contacted by some publisher expressing interest in a new edition. So at some point, maybe.
What we are doing today is an opportunity for the people, at least in the conference, to get to know you and to know your story, if possible. And I would like to present that also to the people in Zamora. The subject of this conference is Diáspora Española, Spanish diaspora, migration and exiles, migración y exilios, exiles in many, many ways, in many, many terms. So you are part of it. You are an exile too, as a child.
Well, my original birth certificate disappeared in a bombing, so I only had something else. And then when I finally got the papers from Madrid, the official signature from the secretary, her last name was Franco. So I thought, that's why it took so long. When the Civil War started, we were in the Guadaramas for the summer, where my father frequently took a chalet with his older sister, Conchita, and her husband, and he always put the rent in their name so he could be a little more anonymous, since he had over time had some problems occasionally with some of his journalism would come out and then he would have to hide. Right. So we were there when the war started, and we were very dependent on the radio. I have my mother's radio. I have the box. I wasn't even, when the war started, 36, I wasn't even 2 years old. I became 2 in October of 36. Anyway, my father heard there was a bus of milicianos, franquistas, looking for him in the town, and also looking for his friend who was a director of mines, director of mountains. So they both decided they would leave, and my father said to Amparo, if things get bad, nobody knows who you are, but if things get bad, take the children to Zamora. Nothing ever happens in Zamora. And then he and his friend walked out over the mountains to join the defense because there was a General Mola was bringing troops down from the north. And an hour after they left, Mola and his troops entered the village. And the Republican Air Force, which wasn't very big, started bombing the town, and we were evacuated. First to a sanitarium, and we spent the night in a garage, and next door in the other garage, they'd set up an operating theater, which they were doing surgery without anesthetic all night long. So the screams of pain sort of set a flavor to this. And of course, the adults were all freaking out. There was my mother, there was Conchita, there was Conchita's husband and their children, and us two. And then the director's children, there were 2 girls, and they had a cook. So there was a group of women with children, basically, and one man being Conchita's husband, who worked for the post office. And after that one night, they evacuated us further back to the next town. Don't ask me the name, it's in the book. And we were put up in a house that turned out to belong to a wealthy franquista, mm-hmm. whatever they're called. And my mother was freaking out. It was very hot. First, one group would gain an advantage and machine gun people in the park across the street, and then the other group would gain advantage and machine gun people in the park. And according to Conchita, my mother was very upset, and she had to keep telling her, calm down, calm down. I don't know how many days we were there, but a call came through for all post office workers to report for duty, and he had to go. So at that point, my mother and her sister-in-law separated, and I don't know how many days it was before she decided to go back to Zamora. And so she went with the director of the mine, of the forest's wife, cook, 2 children. So it was 4 children and 3 women, I guess, at that point. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they took I think it was a night train. I don't know how long they had to wait to get on a train. And then, according to the 2 girls who I interviewed for the book, the director's daughters, the train was bombed, and we had to hide in a tunnel, a culvert, I think, under the train. But then finally we got to Medina del Campo, mm-hmm. and there my mother made a mistake. She tried to telephone my father to tell him what was going on. She, had worked for the telephone company, mm-hmm. and it's, obviously a little aware of how to do things, but the calls were being monitored.
Right.
And so then she was arrested and questioned and had to call on her brother-in-law in Zamora to vouch for her. And so we continued to Zamora. But I think from that point on, she was watched. Mm. And she was not being very smart, because she would talk very loudly. Oh, no, we're going to win the war. This is simple. I'm listening to Madrid radio, which was not allowed, and everything's going well, and blah, blah, blah. And her friends were saying, shh, don't, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so she was being watched, and she learned very quickly that both her brothers had been put in jail, and that the family cafe had been closed because it was a meeting place for Republicans. And then she learned first that one brother had been shot, mm-hmm. her older brother, and then she learned her younger Antonio, who was her favorite, had been killed too. And it was done with the what is it called? The law of escape. Mm-hmm. You put the prisoners in mm-hmm. a truck, and then mm-hmm. you say, "Let's stop for a cigarette." Oh, why don't you make a run for it, and then you get shot in the back. Mm-hmm. So both of them were killed, and when she heard about her brother Antonio, she became very upset, and I think she did go to the military governor, and there are now 2 versions of how she was arrested. One was she fell in the street running away and was arrested, and the other was there was an arrest that night at the apartment, and she and the family blames the brother-in-law for denouncing her. Mm-hmm. And as my cousin Magdalena says, if there was no denouncing, there would be no arrest. But mm-hmm. somebody turned her in. And by now it was August 36, mm-hmm. I think. And she was put in prison in a cell designed for 4 people, and there were maybe 12 women in there with their children. She had her baby with her, my sister. We interviewed a woman who had been a 12-year-old in the cell and gave us a very good description of the horrible conditions and how at night they would call for particular women up the stairs and those women would never be seen again. They had to come immediately, and then never be seen again. And also we had the testimony of a woman whose husband had her repatriated, and she wrote an excellent account, which was made into a pamphlet. It was printed in the daily Madrid paper, and then there was also a pamphlet that was translated into French with a Picasso drawing on the cover, and it gave very horrible details of what were being done to these women.
Mm-hmm.
And in October, the women were outside in the patio, and the head jailer came up and snatched my baby sister from her. And at that point, she realized she was going to be killed. Mm-hmm. And I think she went into a kind of a semi out of her mind, you know. Mm-hmm. And many people said that from that point on, she really lost contact with reality, kind of. And then later that evening, the priest, she went for confession, and the priest denied her absolution because she wouldn't denounce my father. Mm. And my sister was the first to visit Zamora, by the way. She went. She must have gone in '76 dressed as a nun in her Episcopal habit, and she visited with the bishop, and the bishop apologized on the behalf of the Catholic Church for the mistreatment and death of our mother, which I think meant a lot to her. She's an Episcopal nun. She's not a Catholic. Mm-hmm. Anyway, my sister was taken, of course, from jail and put in the orphanage, which was a nun run by nuns. Mm-hmm. And I was obviously very upset, and we had a nursemaid who was with us. I forgot to mention her. And I think she was taking care of me a lot of the time while the baby was nursing and so forth. And she became very upset too, and had to find it. Was taken, left obviously the family, and I was taken by an old blind aunt to the country, to her little farm in the country. As a distraction, I think, the little animals, a different environment. And I think I was with her up until January, when the Red Cross came to get us. Mm-hmm. My father did not learn of Amparo's death until, I think, December. There was he became chief of staff for General Lister, which was the best fighting group the Republicans had. It was also under control of the Stalinist commissars. Mm-hmm. And there was a battle where they, with artillery, bombed one town, and then when they attacked the wrong town, which was still heavily armed, and then there was a counterattack, which almost wiped them out. And according to Lister, the only way they survived was one Russian commissar firing a howitzer point blank down the street at the troops, and that allowed them to retreat. He also accuses my father of desertion and cowardice under fire. He said while this was all going on, Ramón Sendero retreated to Madrid to live his luxurious lifestyle. But I think what happened was, somewhere in there he got a message of what happened to Amparo, because the woman who was repatriated out of the jail came back to Madrid, and she must have finally gotten a message to him. and also not only a message, but a note from Amparo hidden in the baby's clothes that said, do not worry, I love you, I die for you, but what is going to happen to the children? They're yours now. And he took that very seriously and immediately left for France to apply to the Red Cross to get us out. Mm-hmm. And I think that his departure was very sudden. I don't think he got permission from Lister to leave. Anyway, so he went to the head of the Red Cross in France, and they sent an ambulance across Spain to Zamora to evacuate us, while he waited in Barayón in a hotel. And while he was waiting, he met this very beautiful young Basque woman who had been the foster daughter of the mayor of Guernica. The mayor of Guernica and his wife and this young woman was there who was sort of convent bred. But he fell in love with her, and she fell in love with him. And he promised the freaked out parents that they would have a church wedding when they got to Barcelona, and they had the children. So they got us. They took a plane to Barcelona, only to discover there were no priests in Barcelona, number one. Number two, my father would never have had a church wedding ever. So then there are two versions. One version of the family story is that they did have a civil ceremony. The other version is they didn't. But anyway, he tried to get a command in Barcelona, but no one, Lister had given him such a bad reputation that nobody wanted him around. So he, I think, was feeling a little threatened, and so they left again and settled in Pau, in the French Pyrenees. Mm-hmm. And she became pregnant, and at some point, I don't know, before or after the baby was born, they moved to a little town called Louviejouzon, which was closer to the Spanish border, and had a little cottage. And we had some photos of us children, from there. I always thought they were taken in Barcelona, but when we saw the cottage, we actually retraced this. We went to the little town, and there's only one hotel in the village. And I asked the owner how I could get some information. He said, go to the village butcher. He knows everyone. So we went to the village butcher. He said, oh yes, there's a woman who married a Spanish soldier. Talk to her. So we talked to her, and she said, oh yes, I think I know who your father was. I think I know who rented him the little cottage. I'll take you there tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So we met the landlady, who was actually the daughter of the one who rented to my father. And she said, oh yes, I knew your father. He came to our wedding, and he gave us some of his books inscribed as wedding presents and so forth. So that was it's interesting. In the village, the continuity is excellent. Anyway, but back to the original story, then we were evacuated. My father was asked to come to America with two other authors to promote the cause. And this was now 37, I guess. So he was traveling on a diplomatic passport, of course. He came back to his wife, our stepmother, and there was something that made him very angry. And I don't know what it is, and she never would tell us. And it could either be that she was a 21-year-old with 3 children under 3. And I think either she was disciplining us in a way he disapproved of, maybe spanking me or something, or maybe there was another man hanging around. I don't know. But whatever it was, he took me and my sister away and left for Paris, abandoning her and her baby, and cutting off all communication. And in Paris, he found us what he did is he found a children's sanctuary in Calais run by Spanish communists. And he put us there for the winter. And he stayed in Paris working on various political writings and so forth. And he found a woman journalist who was German, who I think became his girlfriend. And but he would visit us at this place. We were not very happy there. We were the youngest children there. My sister was only hardly a year, I guess. And she got a very bad case of pneumonia. Almost didn't survive, actually. And the older boys were bullying me, I think. And we had neither of us a good experience there. And he finally borrowed enough money from his girlfriend's mother to buy boat tickets. And then he put us on. He thought he considered moving us to England, where he had a good friend who was his translator, Peter Chalmers Mitchell, had translated a number of his books. But he must have seen the coming war, Hitler getting more and more aggressive, and he decided, no, I have this diplomatic passport, let's go take them to America.